Hi, my name is Jerry, I'm a fantasy author, and in this short series of videos, I'm here to talk to you about the reality of being a self-published author, what it means, how to get started, and what to expect. Now, in a previous video, I laid down the principle that writing is an art, but publishing is a business. And one of the key differences between the two is that while art is something you can do all on your own up in your ivory tower, if you're gonna get into a business, you will have to work with others at some point. So in this video, I'm gonna be going over some of the key people that you'll be collaborating with, namely your beta readers, editor, and cover designer. Now, just to clarify, this is not meant to be an actual walkthrough of the publishing process, that's going to be its own series later, but rather, this is about how you should approach these collaborations in order to avoid both setting yourself up for disappointment or being taken advantage of. So, first on your list is your beta readers. Now, a beta reader is someone that you provide with an early version of your manuscript, typically right after you've done your initial pass of cleanup and self-editing. At this point, you're just trying to assess the overall viability of your story and how much of a chance it has at resonating with audiences, so you'll be trying to collect as many different opinions as you can. Because of this, while there are professional beta readers and professional editors who provide beta reading services, unless you're absolutely loaded, you'll probably be working with volunteers. Typically, you will find these volunteers on forums like Reddit, on r/beta readers, or by putting out an open call on social media using #beta readers, or by asking friends and family, although I would be very skeptical about this last one. See, the thing about friends and relatives is that while they will eagerly sign up to show you how supportive they are, they will also just as eagerly make up an endless parade of excuses as to why they couldn't get around to reading your book, or worse yet, they will just shower you with empty and completely useless compliments. That said, it doesn't technically hurt to ask these people, but I would recommend that you don't rely on them entirely and set realistic expectations. If you do ask a friend or relatives, I would recommend looking for someone who you know is not afraid to be honest, and ideally someone who themselves engages in some sort of creative hobby, because they're more likely to understand the importance of clear feedback. One thing you can and very much should do in order to minimize the number of people flaking on you is to be very upfront and direct about the scope and duration of the project. So when you put out your open call on Reddit or social media or wherever, besides including the title, genre, and synopsis of your book, also include the length, both in words and pages. And if you're going to be sending out the entire manuscript all at once, then include the deadline by which you expect feedback. And if you're going to be sending out in batches, then include how many batches there will be, how long each one will be, and how frequently you'll be sending them, so people can work out if this is something that fits into their schedule. After you have sent out your manuscript, either the whole thing or the first batch, and it's time to get feedback, don't just ask people to tell you what they think. Send them a list of pointed, specific questions. Are you able to follow the plot? Which parts are the least interesting? Who is your favorite or least favorite character and why? Has your opinion changed about anything? What do you think of this or this specific scene? And so on. This is especially important if you're sending out your manuscript in batches, because this gives you insight into your readers' moment-to-moment thought process as they make their way through the book. Now, once you do start getting feedback, one all-important maxim you need to keep in mind is to ask your betas for problems, not solutions. Laypersons in particular will happily share with you their suggestions about how to make your book better. There should be an action scene here. These two characters should kiss. There should be dragons in your book. When you get this kind of feedback, don't take it at face value, but rather try to understand the underlying problem that your beta is so helpfully trying to solve for you. So when they say that there should be an action scene here, what that might mean is that the pacing gets a little bit sluggish, or maybe that the resolution to one of your subplots just didn't feel cathartic enough. If they say that these two characters should kiss, that might be because those characters have an engaging relationship and they want to see that explored in more emotional depth, or that those characters have a lot of tension that just doesn't seem to go anywhere. And if your beta tells you that your low fantasy book needs dragons, then they just want to read a different book and they can write that one themselves. Thank you very much. All of this is not to say that you should absolutely never listen to any of these suggestions, but rather it's to say that if you do end up incorporating these ideas into your book, that should be because you think it makes sense for your story, not because you hope it'll make your book more popular. This is one of the reasons why in one of the earlier videos I highlighted the importance of knowing what story you want to tell. When I was working on my first book, one of my betas was unhappy with how one of the characters died. Spoiler alert, someone dies in a murder mystery. He said that the scene should have been much more epic and the character should have gone out in a heroic blaze of glory, and I just completely disregarded that because that was not the kind of book I was writing. Okay, so that's what you do when you do get feedback. What about if you don't get feedback? Well, the first rule there is do not jump to conclusions. Don't immediately assume that your reader has flaked on you or that they hate your book and they hate your face. By all means, check in on them and keep your tone polite and neutral. Hi, have you received my email? Have you had a chance to get started yet? When do you think you might be able to send some feedback? Something like that. Don't get snippy or passive-aggressive because at the end of the day, these people are doing you a favor for free and that kind of tone isn't gonna make them want to help you anymore. But at the same time, these people did make you a promise and it is not unreasonable for you to wish to know if they plan on keeping that promise. All right, after your betas, next on the list is your editor. And this is where the subject starts to get a little touchy because here we enter the territory of finance. Beta readers can be laypersons and volunteers, but editing is professional, skilled, creative labor. Now, I did say previously that publishing is a business and every business comes with an upfront investment. But that being said, we are looking at a very broad price range here where a single pass of editing can cost anywhere from a couple hundred to several $1,000s, and not everyone works with the same budget. I certainly don't have $5,000 just lying around for me to spend on editing, and even at my more affordable price point, this is still an expense that I have to plan for months in advance. So the most important advice I can give you is to be a conscious customer. And that means knowing your budget and knowing what you want. Now, again, the entire editing process is going to be its own video later. But for now, in the briefest terms, there are 4 basic types of editing services. And these are manuscript critique, which is more or less like a professional beta read, developmental editing, which focuses on plot, character, and setting, line editing, which focuses on style and prose, and lastly, copy editing, which is that last bit of polish about grammar and punctuation and formatting. These are all different services with different prices, although a lot of editors do offer line and copy editing as a single package. So it is very important for you to know which one of these you're planning to buy, especially because these have a specific order, and if you get them done out of order, you're just wasting your money. So once you know what you're after, you can start actually looking for an editor. Now, nowadays, the default place for looking for professional services is either Fiverr or Upwork. Although in this specific case, you can also check out Reedsy, who have a much more curated list of professionals specifically from the publishing industry, although these do tend to be more on the pricier side. When you have one or more candidates, one thing that can be very useful is to request a sample edit. As the name implies, this means you send a sample of your book, usually about 10 to 15 pages, and the editor will edit those pages as if they were editing the actual book. Some editors do offer this for free, but by default, you should expect to be paying for this. And if you don't see a clear indication on the editor's profile or listing, just try contacting them directly to ask if they offer sample edits and how you go about placing the order for them. When you get back the sample, the criteria you'll be looking at are how thorough the editor is, how well they explain their choices, which they should always do, and just generally how much their style seems to gel with yours and how much they seem to understand your writing. All of this might sound like a lot of time and effort and especially money, but if you're planning to release more than one book, Establishing a stable working relationship with an editor who understands you and your style and who you can trust to deliver good quality work can make all the difference. Now, once you do hire an editor and you send them your manuscript and you get their feedback, the same basic rule applies as with the beta readers, which is to expect problems, not solutions. Now, your editor will know this rule. It's important that you remember it. An editor is not the same thing as a ghostwriter. It is not their job to fix your book for you. It is their job to point out everything that is keeping your book from realizing its potential. The last person that I'll be talking about today is your cover designer, provided that you choose to hire one, because this one is optional. There are websites out there where you can get customizable pre-made cover designs at a low price or sometimes even for free. Now, granted, by their nature, these are going to be more on the generic side, but still, it is entirely possible that you'll find one that really clicks with you. And after you've spent a bunch of money on editing, which is arguably more important, it is not unreasonable to try and save some money elsewhere. If you do decide to have a custom cover made, the same basic advice applies as with the editor, so know your budget and know what you're after. However, this does not mean that you should go to your designer with a specific cover in mind. As a matter of fact, even if you do have a very clear idea, I would still recommend that you allow your designer to surprise you first, and then see if you can find some sort of middle ground or work your ideas into theirs. The specifics that you should give your designer are obviously the book's title, the genre, its atmosphere, its setting, and some of the key plot elements. If you do want to talk about visual specifics, then talk about things like color palette, shape language, and just general style influences like Victorian or Gothic or steampunk. On top of this, a lot of artists will also appreciate if you can send them references in the form of existing book covers that you like. In this case, make sure to keep it open-ended and try to send several book covers explaining what you like about each of them. Don't just send the artist one specific cover and say, make me something exactly like this, because besides specificity, two things that artists also appreciate are getting to exercise their creativity and not being accused of plagiarism. Lastly, some artists will be willing to actually read your book to gain inspiration. However, this is not something you should take for granted, and if your artist does offer to do this for you, keep in mind that they will be reading that book as part of their job, so you will need to compensate them for those hours. Once you have discussed everything with your artist, let them cook, and then when they get back to you with your design, it is your turn to give feedback, and this is not the time to be a timid people pleaser. Every decent artist will offer at least one revision at no extra cost, usually several. These revisions are calculated into their price, so you should take full advantage of them, even if it means a radical style shift. This is something they expect to do. You are not making them do extra labor, and at the end of the day, it is just as important to them as it is to you that both of you are happy with the product. Just like with the editor, establishing a stable relationship with a designer can be incredibly helpful if you're planning to release more books, especially if it's a series, because then you can preserve that all-important visual cohesion. My first book went through 3 different cover designs before I found my current designer, who I just couldn't be more grateful for. I can tell you without exaggeration, his designs are like half my marketing. Every single time I'm selling my books at a convention, I can see people immediately being drawn into how pretty they look, and it is so rewarding to see. All right, so after going over all those specifics, there are just a few general caveats left that I want to touch upon. After releasing my first book, one thing that I was honestly quite stunned to find out is that there is an entire cottage industry dedicated to scamming self-published authors. Now, I can only hope you're not yet tired of me saying this, but this will be its own video in the future because I have mountains of receipts. But here and now, I just want to call your attention to 2 things. The first one is that any collaboration you enter into as a self-published author should be initiated by you. After you release your first book and it starts getting reviews, you will inevitably start receiving unsolicited emails from marketing experts offering to help you promote it. These are scams. All of them, without exception. Do not even bother replying to them. If and when you do want someone to help you with your book's marketing, you can seek out a qualified and reliable expert. The other thing is specific to Upwork because of the way recruitment works there. So on Fiverr, you are the one who searches for experts and then contacts them to discuss a potential collaboration. Whereas on Upwork, you have to describe the job you want done and include your budget, and then put it on the website, and then the professionals will start contacting you with their offers. If you go this route, it is extremely important that you don't allow yourself to be talked into paying for something you never wanted. I unfortunately let this happen to me once, and it was an embarrassingly expensive lesson to learn. And then finally, I also want to touch upon that potentially even more uncomfortable situation where someone isn't actively trying to scam you, they're just not delivering satisfactory work. In these cases, my rule of thumb is the exact same thing that my high school math teacher told us on our first day of class, which is that we can be on good terms, we will never be buddies. Because yes, it is good to establish a rapport with your editor or designer or whoever, and yes, it is important to exercise clemency if someone misses a deadline because of sickness or some other personal reason, but at the end of the day, your relationship with these people is professional and transactional. You are paying them to provide a service, and you have every right to expect that service to be delivered to the agreed terms. And there is absolutely nothing selfish about backing out of a commission or even breaking off an ongoing working relationship if you feel that your time is not being respected or that your patronage is being taken for granted. Well, that was kind of a bummer note to end on, but I can assure you it is not all doom and gloom, and given time, you will definitely find people that you are happy to work with. Either way, what do you think? Was any of that useful? Was there something I missed? Was there something I should have talked more about? By all means, let me know in the comments, and until next time, stay tuned.